Singapore workers in jobs with a higher risk of getting infected may be asked by their employers to be vaccinated. And for a closer look on this, we're joined by Associate Professor Lawrence Loh from the NUS Centre for Governance and Sustainability. Professor, firstly, the advisory isn't mandatory, so how useful is it for businesses?
I think even though it is not mandatory, we have to take the advisory very seriously, given the nature of the situation now. In fact, it is very critical we progress collectively to achieve immunity for normalcy. And I think it's useful in the sense that the guidelines are clear, they are practical, and I think we should always see the fact that it is not just about the workers. Many of these workers are actually front-facing. They face the customers, they face the patient. So I believe this advisory is actually acting in the best interest for each and everyone and for all. And all the more, we should take it as a tool to guide good governance in all the workplaces involved.
A tool to guide good governance, but the advisory doesn't name the sectors whose workers might be deemed to be at high risk of COVID-19 infection, Professor Loh. Does this ambiguity perhaps complicate matters and perhaps it might give rise to disputes?
Yes, I think you are right to say that it's not sector specific. But even having said that, I think it is setting guided. In other words, there are very clear scenarios, very clear situation where the advisory will be very relevant. In fact, I think it's actually not possible to cover each and every relevant situation. And all the more, I think we should actually be guided, be directed by the intent, even though if, subsequently there may be disputes. I think we should look at the spirit of the guidelines and not always the letter of the law. So I believe on balance, it will really serve its purpose to move everybody forward towards a normal work life for all.
It does suggest that companies may recoup COVID-19 related costs from workers themselves who refuse to be vaccinated. How challenging is this to do, and what are the legal factors to consider?
Yes, maybe let me unpack this. Employees are employed, meaning they are paid to perform specific contracted work. And I think in all settings, companies can always frame policies along the way. But in this particular case, we are talking about high-risk setting, and all the more, the employers involved would find it necessary to actually set out some clear policies to the workers involved in that particular situation. So I think if there are additional costs incurred by the company for the good performance of the work due to the choices made by the employees, I think it's only fair that companies should be able to recover in these circumstances. But of course, all these deductions must be authorized, and I think that there are some stipulations in the Employers Act, the Employment Act. So I believe it will definitely not be abused, even though they could be challenged. But I think ultimately the situational concerns will take precedence.
And Professor Loh, this advisory notwithstanding, employers have been encouraged not to terminate or to threaten to terminate an employee because they refuse to take the vaccine. But we've had redeployments and potential pay cuts on the cards as well with this. So is that statement sufficient to protect workers' interests?
Yes, of course, I think that statement is very good. The ultimate acts should not be resorted to. Any action must actually be fair to both the workers as well as the employers. I think it's a very good trade-off, and naturally there'll be recourses if any workers feel that they have been unduly, I would say, prejudiced against their recourses. The workers can actually consult the Ministry of Manpower or even the union if they are unionized when there's any doubt. So I believe, this is the best we can get to achieve now, given the intricacies and the necessity of the situation.
And to your mind then, should there be legislation to prevent disputes?
The regulatory framework is actually adequate as of now. From the way I see it, there are no fundamental gaps. We can achieve what we intended with the existing arrangements because actually legislation may tend to set things in stone. There are certain fluidity in the current setting. I think it's good to have some flexibility. So I believe we should understand that what we are undergoing now are very extraordinary circumstances, and ultimately it's very important to have responsible employers as well as responsible workers as well.
Professor Loh, thank you for your thoughts on this issue. That was Associate Professor Lawrence Loh from NUS Centre for Governance and Sustainability.